Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Phyllis Summers had promised herself she wouldn't stir up trouble, at least not today, not on the wedding day of Christine Blair and Danny Romalotti, a day Phyllis had once imagined would belong to her. But as she swept into the bustling reception with Kane Ashby at her side, the familiar spark of chaos flickered in her eyes as champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers, and everyone basked in blissful celebration. The reception was warm and glowing, filled with the kind of joy that made even the fiercest rivalries soften around the edges, and yet Phyllis slipped inside like a live wire waiting for the perfect moment to ignite. Kane, equal parts amused and apprehensive, stayed glued to her side as Christine lifted her brows and forced a smile, determined no storm, not even one named Phyllis Summers, would ruin her day. So when Phyllis insisted she had a toast to make, Christine simply shrugged, offered a wry smirk, and gestured dramatically for the room to indulge her. "Go ahead," Christine quipped, her expression suggesting she was bracing for the worst. "At least it'll be entertaining." And with that opening, Phyllis launched into what could only be described as a comically awkward, backhandedly sentimental speech, rambling about second chances, surprising love, fate, destiny, and how sometimes the universe finally gives two people the happy ending they deserve, even if others had spent decades trying to derail it. A few guests exchanged nervous looks. Danny winced. Christine stiffened. But by the end, even she admitted, through slightly clenched teeth, that it wasn't terrible, at least not by Phyllis standards. The room exhaled as Phyllis clinked her glass with Kane's and slinked off toward the staircase with him in tow, leaving behind whispers, relieved sighs, and the lingering scent of dramatic possibility. Upstairs, in the dim glow of a lavish suite, Kane confronted her gently, searching, questioning, wanting to know if she truly intended to move on or if this was just another flashy detour in her never-ending emotional carousel. But Phyllis, ever theatrical, wasn't about to let insecurity ruin her mood. Instead, she suggested a game, a provocative ritual of shedding baggage, where articles of clothing became metaphors for emotional burdens. Each piece that hit the carpet symbolized pain, guilt, or the ghosts of ex-lovers, and she stripped Kane of Lily Winters, stripped him of the weight of his kids' judgments, stripped him of the shadows that had followed him from past relationships. Kane, half laughing and half aching, surrendered to the catharsis, and soon Phyllis was peeling away her own baggage, scraps of heartbreak, resentment, longing, and the two tumbled onto the bed in a whirlwind of release and reckless desire. Meanwhile, downstairs, Daniel Romalotti Jr. battled a different kind of panic, one fueled not by heartbreak but by stage fright. His upcoming performance with Tessa Porter, meant to be a heartfelt gift to his father and Christine, suddenly felt too heavy, too personal, too vulnerable. "I can't do this," he murmured, voice catching, but Tessa, calm, warm, steady, guided him back from the edge, her confidence wrapping around him like a blanket. She lifted his chin, told him he was capable, reminded him that the moment wasn't about perfection but sincerity. And somehow, as she grabbed his hand and squeezed, Daniel found his courage again. When they performed, just a simple love song, soft and sweet, every note landed like magic. Guests swayed, Christine teared up, Danny beamed with pride, and even those who had doubted the pairing felt something soften in their chests. Afterwards, more toasts followed, including a tender speech from Michael Baldwin and a surprisingly heartfelt one from Abby, who proclaimed that love deserved to be loud, messy, and celebrated. Eventually, the newlyweds slipped upstairs to change, whispering, laughing, and stealing kisses in between wardrobe adjustments. They were blissfully wrapped up in each other and barely noticed when they nearly collided with Phyllis and Kane in the hallway. Danny flinched, bracing for an eruption, but surprisingly, Phyllis simply wished them well, offered a sincere, almost gentle bon chance, and waved them off with what seemed to be genuine goodwill. Christine blinked, taken aback, but accepted the blessing, and the pair drifted back toward the stairs, ready for their honeymoon departure. Once back downstairs, the atmosphere mellowed into a softer tone. Nina Webster, heart-aching but smiling, shared beloved memories of Chance, savoring every detail as if speaking them aloud kept him closer. Devin Winters and Abby Carlton Winters swayed together on the dance floor, radiating a quiet intimacy, a warmth that suggested the honeymoon phase wasn't merely alive but thriving. Billy Abbott cracked jokes with Tracy. Sharon embraced Mariah, thanking her for helping with the event. Everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful for a night touched by Phyllis Summers' presence. And as fate would have it, that peace was about to shatter. When the room had thinned out a bit and the music softened to a romantic hum, Daniel and Tessa found themselves tucked into a quiet corner, just the two of them, removed from the noise and expectations. The glow of string lights illuminated their faces as they talked about the performance, about their families, about everything and nothing. Something in the moment felt charged, electric, but not in the theatrical way Phyllis often created drama. This was gentler, hidden, dangerous. Daniel's smile lingered too long. Tessa's laughter softened into warmth. And suddenly Daniel's eyes shimmered with something raw, unfiltered, painfully honest. Today could still be more perfect, he whispered, a confession disguised as an observation. Tessa's breath faltered. Their hearts raced. And in one reckless, universe-altering moment, Daniel leaned in, slowly, cautiously, but undeniably, and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a rushed kiss. It wasn't impulsive passion. It was the kind of kiss that held years of unresolved emotion, the kind that happened when timing finally shifted into alignment, the kind that could break worlds apart. Tessa didn't pull away, she melted, she answered, she surrendered to the truth neither of them had dared to touch. And that was the precise moment when Phyllis Summers and Kane Ashby, fresh from their emotional stripping game and looking for a late-night drink, rounded the corner and froze in stunned, scandal-soaked disbelief. Phyllis's gasp sliced the moment open. Kane blinked, jaw-dropping. There, just feet away, Daniel and Tessa were tangled in a kiss that shouldn't exist, a kiss that carried consequences none of them could yet imagine. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then Phyllis, ever the queen of dramatic timing, leaned forward, eyes widening, a knowing smirk tugging at her lips as realization washed over her. She wasn't just witnessing a kiss. She was witnessing the spark that could ignite the next explosion in Genoa City, the next scandal, the next heartbreak. And as Daniel and Tessa leapt apart, guilt flooding their faces, Phyllis exchanged a slow, gleeful glance with Kane, because whatever they had just stumbled upon was big. Bigger than anything they'd expected tonight. And Phyllis Summers wasn't about to let a secret like that stay buried. Not tonight. Not ever. Phyllis and Kane spy Daniel kissing Tessa. Phyllis Summers and Kane Ashby will spy Daniel Romalotti Jr. kissing Tessa Porter after the newlyweds leave for Paris. At Danny Romalotti and Christine Blair's wedding reception, there'll be plenty of funny stories and toasts. Phyllis will enter with Kane and insist on raising a glass of her own to the happy couple. Christine will decide nothing can rain on her parade today and will urge Phyllis to go ahead since this might be entertaining. Phyllis will end up giving an awkward toast about how Christine and Danny are meant to be before heading upstairs with Kane. It won't exactly be a heartwarming speech, but Christine will admit it was decent considering it came from Phyllis. At one point on Monday's YNR episode, Nina Webster will admit to Christine that Esther Valentine was the one behind the mums that were delivered. Esther didn't realize Christine was allergic, so Nina will confess she didn't have the heart to break the news to her ow. Once Phyllis lands in a suite with Kane, he'll push her to prove she's moving on. Phyllis will suggest a game where they remove articles of clothing to represent their baggage, so she'll help Kane strip and rid himself of Lily Winters as well as his kids' disapproval. Phyllis will shed some baggage of her own before hitting the sheets with Kane again. Downstairs, Daniel will panic over his upcoming performance with Tessa and insist she'll have to do it alone. Tessa will give Daniel a pep talk, so he'll get back on board and help her perform a sweet song as a gift for Danny and Christine. There'll be more speeches before Christine and Danny head upstairs to change clothes. Danny and Christine will squeeze in some sizzling alone time before they run into Phyllis and Kane in the corridor. Although Danny will worry Phyllis is going to cause trouble, she'll wish the pair bon voyage and insist she genuinely means it. Christine and Danny will return to their guests, who'll throw petals as the newlyweds leave for their Paris honeymoon. Back downstairs, Nina will enjoy hearing some stories about Chancellor since it'll be a way for him to stay alive in her heart. Devin Winters will also enjoy a dance with Abby Winters as they appreciate the fact that the honeymoon isn't over for them. Tessa will share a warm moment alone with Daniel, who'll decide there's a way to make today even more perfect. Daniel will lean in for a kiss with Tessa, so Phyllis and Kane will spy them making out when they appear nearby. For one suspended, breathless second, no one moved, no one spoke, Daniel and Tessa frozen mid-guilt, Phyllis and Kane standing like stunned spectators at the opening scene of a scandal ready to rip through Genoa city like wildfire. But then the moment cracked open with a trembling gasp from Tessa and a choked stammer from Daniel, each scrambling to gather words that no longer made sense now that the universe had exposed their truth to exactly the wrong pair of witnesses. Daniel's voice tripped first, an incoherent tumble of explanations, denials, and emotional debris, but Phyllis's raised brow and slow, serpentine smile cut him off before he could begin constructing the weak defenses racing through his mind. "Wow," she murmured, drawing out the single word like a judge passing sentence, her arms folding with theatrical precision. Now that wasn't in the wedding program. Tessa's face paled, horror filling her eyes as she backed away a step, clutching her trembling hands to her chest as if she could physically shove the stolen kiss back into the shadows where it belonged. Kane cleared his throat beside Phyllis, torn between wanting to disappear and wanting to stage manage whatever inevitable explosion was about to follow, but Phyllis was already stepping forward, lips curved in that dangerous, knowing smirk she wore whenever she smelled high-octane emotional carnage brewing. Daniel, remembering too late exactly who he was dealing with, steeled himself, knowing any plea for discretion would only feed Phyllis's appetite for chaos. Tessa stumbled through a shaky explanation. "It wasn't planned, it shouldn't have happened, please, you can't say anything," but Phyllis pounced, looming forward with predatory precision. "Oh, sweetheart," she purred, voice dipped in venomous sympathy, "you don't kiss someone like that by accident." Daniel's jaw clenched, a flash of protective instinct overriding his own panic as he stepped in front of Tessa. "Enough," he snapped, surprising even himself as he squared his shoulders. "This isn't your business, Mom." But Phyllis barked out a laugh, sharp and cutting. "Isn't my business? Oh, Daniel, come on. When you start detonating your personal life in the middle of your father's wedding reception, it becomes everyone's business, especially mine." Tessa looked like she might burst into tears, Daniel looked like he might punch a wall, Kane looked like he desperately wished he'd stayed upstairs in that hotel suite instead of following Phyllis down for another drink. And then, as if summoned by fate or misfortune, a small group of wedding guests approached from around the corner, Tracy Abbott laughing at something Abby Winters said, Devin wiping frosting from Dominic's chin, Sharon trailing behind with empty champagne flutes, and Daniel froze, blocking their view with the rigid posture of a man trying to physically shield a secret that was already unraveling. Phyllis's eyes gleamed mischievously, loving the tension, the discomfort, the delightful potential for destruction, but to everyone's surprise, she remained silent. She didn't expose them. She didn't shout the truth. Instead, she simply watched Daniel squirm, her silence more damning than any words could ever be. When the group walked past, oblivious, she finally leaned forward, voice dropping to an intimate whisper that sent a chill up Daniel's spine. "Relax," she murmured. "If I wanted to make a scene, I would have done it 5 minutes ago." But that didn't comfort him. Nothing about her tone suggested mercy. She wasn't protecting him, she was preparing him, savoring the power of knowledge only she possessed. Kane gently tugged at her arm as if reminding her there were lines even she shouldn't cross, but Phyllis brushed him off. "Let's go," she said airily, as if she hadn't just uncovered a secret that could shatter multiple relationships. But before she turned away, she cast one final look, sharp, calculating, almost triumphant, at Daniel and Tessa. "We'll talk later." With that, she strolled off with Kane, leaving a trail of dread behind her like cigar smoke from an old noir villain. The second Phyllis disappeared, Daniel collapsed onto a nearby bench, burying his face in his hands as Tessa sank beside him, the world heavy and suffocating around them. "What did we do?" Tessa whispered, voice barely audible. Daniel didn't answer because the truth was too big, too painful, they'd crossed a line neither of them could uncross, and they'd done it on the very night everyone else was celebrating love, loyalty, and fresh beginnings. Tessa touched her lips, still tingling from the kiss, and shame washed over her in waves. "I love Mariah," she said, voice cracking. "I love her so much." Daniel swallowed hard, guilt slicing through him like a blade. "I know," he whispered. "And I love Heather. I'm supposed to be fixing things with her." The word supposed hung between them like a ghost. Because what they'd felt wasn't confusion. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't some wedding night delusion fueled by music and champagne. It was something deeper, older, long buried. Something dangerous because it was real. Meanwhile, Phyllis dragged Kane to a secluded corner behind a floral archway, adrenaline still pumping through her like electricity. "Do not start," Kane warned, raising his hands. "I know that look." She ignored him, pacing like a lioness in a cage. "Do you understand what we just saw?" she hissed. "Do you understand what this means?" "Yes," Kane replied calmly. "It means it's none of our business." Phyllis spun, hands on hips, eyes blazing. "Oh, but it is." Kane exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "Phyllis, this is exactly what gets you into trouble. Leave it alone." "I can't," she snapped. "My son is about to blow up his entire life. Mariah's going through her own mental health crisis. Tessa's been trying to hold everything together. And Heather," she cut herself off, realizing her voice had grown too emotional, too revealing. Kane softened at that, stepping closer. "You're worried," he said gently, "which is fine, but your version of worrying usually involves gasoline and a match." Phyllis glared, but he wasn't wrong. She wanted to intervene. She wanted to confront everyone. She wanted to fix it, her way. But Kane touched her arm, grounding her. "Let Daniel handle his mess," he murmured. "You've got enough of your own." His tone, soft but firm, made something in her deflate, but not entirely. Because while Kane might be right, Phyllis Summers had never been one to let a catastrophic secret sit quietly in her hands. And she sure as hell wasn't starting now. Back upstairs, Daniel and Tessa were having the most painful conversation of their lives. "We have to forget this," Tessa whispered. "We have to pretend it never happened." Daniel nodded, but his eyes betrayed him, shining with fear, regret, and something he didn't want to admit even to himself. "We can't hurt them," she continued. "Not Mariah. Not your family. Not anyone." "We won't," Daniel insisted, gripping her hands with desperate conviction. "No one will ever know. We're going back out there, and we're finishing this night like nothing happened." They stood, smoothing their clothes, inhaling deep breaths as they prepared to walk back into the reception, back into the lights, back into the lies, back into their lives. But as they stepped toward the door, Daniel paused. "Tessa," he murmured. "That kiss," she closed her eyes, pain rippling through her expression. "Don't," she whispered. "Please. Don't say it." So he didn't. Not because he didn't want to, but because speaking the truth would make it real. And they couldn't afford real. Not tonight. Not ever. Downstairs, the reception was starting to thin, guests leaving with blissful smiles, others lingering with late-night champagne flutes, chatter fading into gentle murmurs. Christine and Danny had already departed for their honeymoon, unaware how close scandal had come to crashing their send-off. Sharon chatted with Abby near the gift table. Nina hugged Tracy goodbye. Devin kissed Abby's temple, murmuring that he couldn't wait for them to head home. And into that dwindling crowd stepped Daniel and Tessa, wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Phyllis spotted them immediately from across the room, eyebrow arching as she whispered something to Kane that made him grimace. Daniel felt her gaze like a physical weight but forced himself to smile, mingle, act normal, even when his heart hammered against his ribs. Tessa tried to stay near him but not too near, careful not to draw suspicion, careful to protect the illusion they were both desperate to maintain. But the universe wasn't done punishing them yet. Because as they attempted to blend back into the crowd, Heather Stevens returned from the powder room, eyes bright, cheeks flushed, hair tossed in soft waves, and she beamed at Daniel with such open affection it nearly broke him. "There you are," she said warmly, sliding her hand into his. "I was looking for you. I thought maybe we could head out soon." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. He nodded numbly, squeezing her hand, feeling guilt crawl up his throat like smoke. Tessa turned away quickly, her face crumpling before she hid it behind a brittle smile. And then, because fate thrives on cruelty, Mariah's name flashed across Tessa's phone from an incoming text. "Baby, I miss you. Call me when you leave. I need to hear your voice." Tessa nearly broke. Her eyes filled instantly, and she bit her lip to stifle the sob threatening to escape. Phyllis saw it all, from across the room, her sharp gaze tracking every tremor, every flinch, every crack forming beneath Tessa and Daniel's composure. And Kane saw something shift in her. Again. "Phyllis," he warned quietly. "Don't." But Phyllis wasn't listening. Her jaw hardened, her eyes narrowed, and that familiar fire lit inside her, part fury, part instinct, part maternal protectiveness, part unrestrained chaos. "I'm not letting this spiral," she murmured. "Not while Mariah's fragile. Not while Daniel's lying to Heather. Not while Tessa is drowning in guilt." "Phyllis," Kane tried again, grabbing her wrist. "Stop." "No," she whispered. "Someone has to." And with that, she slipped from Kane's grip and started across the room toward Daniel, determination radiating from her like a storm about to break. Daniel saw her coming. His blood turned to ice. Tessa's breath caught. Kane muttered a curse and hurried after her. And in that exact moment, right as Phyllis Summers arrived to blow the secret open, Mariah walked through the hotel entrance, surprising everyone with her early return. Tessa's phone slipped from her fingers. Daniel went pale. Kane froze mid-step. And Phyllis smiled.